Okay, brothers and sisters, welcome back to The Last Dispensation. I'm your host, Troy Abels. So, Gog and Magog, we're going to talk about that, but also emphasize who Gog is. Now, my notes might seem a little bit discombobulated. That's because I was excitedly researching stuff and information just kept coming in left and right. And I got so excited that I've got stuff all over the place. But nonetheless, we are going to go over this stuff, and you'll just have to kind of put it together in your mind's eye. Okay, here we go. So let's first talk about who Gog is. Gog is not a place. Magog is, but Gog is a leader. He's also the king of Magog, whose invasion of Israel was prophesied by Ezekiel. You can find that in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. The prophecy points to a time when the Gentile nations of the north would set themselves against the people of God and would be defeated and led to recognize Jesus Christ as king. All this appears to be at the second coming of the Lord. Ezekiel 38:39 portrays an invasion of the land of Israel by a foreign authority called Gog. So Gog is a man of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Ezekiel chapter 38 verse 2 encompasses a vision that reveals some critical characteristics of apocalyptic revelation. Is this also going to spread to other parts? Where exactly does it start, and does it progress to other lands? Principally, Gog and Magog is Armageddon, and there are two, and we're going to learn about that. But did you know that Gog is going to be, so the leader of Magog, who is Gog, is going to be a Reubenite. That's right, which means he's from the tribe of Reuben. According to the biblical narrative, the tribe of Reuben descended from Reuben, obviously, the oldest son of the patriarch Jacob. Reuben, along with 9 other tribes, is reckoned by the Bible as part of the northern kingdom of Israel and disappears from history with the demise of that kingdom in circa 723 BC. Gog and Magog, who and what might they be? Reuben, the eldest of Jacob's sons, did not inherit the leadership of Israel and eventually seemed to disappear. Gog is a Reubenite. 1 Chronicles chapter 5 verse 4. Part of it reads, the sons of Joel, Shemaiah his son, Gog his son, Shimei his son. In most ancient and even some modern civilizations, the firstborn male child inherited money, rank, and authority from his father. However, Reuben, though the oldest of the 12 sons of Jacob, does not inherit this from his father, as the important role of ruler is given to his younger brother Judah. So why did Reuben lose his inheritance? Or his birthright? Here are some biblical references. In the Torah, Reuben is briefly described as having had sexual activity with Bilhah, his stepmother's maid and father's concubine. Reuben's behavior angered Jacob to the extent that he gave Reuben's birthright as firstborn to Joseph. A comment within 1 Chronicles 5:1 makes the same point. So what happened to the tribe of Reuben? From after the conquest of the land under Joshua until the formation of the first kingdom of Israel, the tribe of Reuben was a part of a loose confederation of Israelite tribes. 930 BC, the northern tribes split from the house of David to reform a kingdom of Israel as the northern kingdom. Magog. See also Gog, second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, a lot of this from LDS.org and from several other resources. I will cite those references below. In the Bible, a land and people near the Black Sea. So this is important, brothers and sisters, the Black Sea. okay? Their king Gog shall lead the armies of Magog in a last great battle before the second coming of Christ. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 2, 39, 6. The scriptures speak of another great battle of Gog and Magog at the end of the millennium between the forces of God and the forces of evil. So this is also another name for this is Armageddon. And we can read that in Revelations chapter 20, verses 7 through 9, and Doctrine and Covenants section 88, 111 through 116. What direction did the 10 tribes go? Okay, so this is important in finding out why Gog is a Reubenite and where he might be coming from and where Magog might be. The Bible does give us evidence that most of the exiled Israelites migrated generally to the north and east of the old promised land. 2 Kings chapter 15 verse 29 states that the Gileadite tribes and the tribe of Naphtali were carried captive to Assyria. So the Assyrian Empire was located to the east of the kingdom of Israel. These tribes were carried eastward into Asia. When the inhabitants of Samaria were carried captive, 2 Kings 17:6 states that they were transplanted to the regions of Halah, Habor, and the cities of Medes. Media was long identified with the region south of the Caspian Sea, which was in a somewhat northeastern direction from Samaria, but it was still mostly eastward. The apocryphal book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 13, verses 39 through 46, records that many members of the 10 tribes escaped from the Assyrians and migrated independently to a land called Arzareth. For some of you who understand who the Scythians are, we're going to briefly hit on that. Secular evidence indicates that this was in the region of the Black Sea and the Caucasus Mountains. Okay, so here's what's important about the Black Sea and the migrations of these tribes. What tribes did go there? Okay, so here we go. 6 countries border the Black Sea, including the Ukraine to the north, Russia and Georgia to the east, Turkey to the south, and Bulgaria and Romania to the west. So, in my opinion, brothers and sisters, Magog could be any one of these places. But who has most of the firing power and the armies, and who's been positioning themselves in the Middle East lately? Think about that. And who has annexed the Ukraine, and who's trying to kind of bring the Soviet Union back together? Think about that, okay? Now, Jacob's first wife, Leah, bore him 6 sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and Issachar, and Zebulun. 2 other tribes, Gad and Asher, were named after sons born to Jacob, and Zilpah and Leah's maidservant. So, why are the first wife sons important? Because Reuben is one of them, and Issachar, okay? So, I looked up patriarchal blessings, and there are a lot of people of the tribe of Reuben and Issachar in Russia. And it says that the leader, Gog, will be a Reubenite in 1 Chronicles chapter 5. Interesting, huh? Okay, so there are many from the tribe of Issachar and Reuben in Russia. Among others, it would make sense that Issachar and Reuben would stay together since they came from the same mother. The 10 tribes of Israel essentially vanished from their former kingdom of Israel by circa 721 BC. They had been a powerful kingdom in the eastern Mediterranean region for centuries prior to that time. They had been allied to the city-states of Tyre, Sidon, etc., in what historians now call the Phoenician Empire. Their alliance dominated the ancient world's maritime trade routes and, from the time of King David onward, became a powerful military power on land as well. They were exceedingly blessed by God during the time of King David and Solomon. But a long succession of sinful kings led to a steady decline in the strength and influence of the kingdom of Israel. During an approximate 20-year span between 740 and 720 BC, the 10 tribes of Israel went into foreign exile in several waves. At the beginning of this period, the Assyrians took captive the tribe of Naphtali and the Gileadite tribes of Gad, Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh. 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 29. By circa 721 BC, all of the 10 tribes of Israel who had formed the northern kingdom of Israel had been removed from their lands. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 18. While the house of Judah remained in the promised land for a time, many have puzzled over the fate and future of the 10 tribes of Israel. Where did they go? While the Bible foretold the tribes of Israel would scatter, literally to all 4 directions, Genesis chapter 28, verse 14, you can connect many of the banished tribes of Israel to one largely ignored confederation of tribes, which emerged afterward in the region of South Russia. And this is the Scythians. Some of the Israelite tribes scattered into Asia circa 721 BC. The Encyclopedia Americana records the Scythians arrived in the region of South Russia about 700 BC. A historian of the Scythians, Tamara Talbot Rice, wrote the following: "The Scythians did not become a recognizable national entity before the 8th century BC. By the 7th century BC, they had established themselves firmly in southern Russia. Assyrian documents place their appearance on the shores of Lake Urmia, just south of Armenia, in the time of King Sargon, 722 to 705 BC, a date which closely corresponds with that of the first establishment of the first group of Scythians in southern Russia." And to end, I would like to read what Bruce R. McConkie had to say about the war involving Gog and Magog. Quote, "Gog and Magog are the prophetic names given in the scriptures to that combination of nations which will fight against the purposes of the Lord on 2 separate and future occasions. At the time of and incident to the second coming of the Lord and the ushering in of the millennial era, and at the end of the millennium, plus a little season when the final overthrow of evil and the destruction of the wicked shall take place. The Lord has not revealed who the nations are, but his prophets have described in general terms what they will do in the great battles that shall hereafter be fought. Because we are living in the last days immediately preceding the second coming of the Lord, our chief interest in Gog and Magog centers in the pre-millennial war. The following quotation summarizes what is to take place. Our Lord is to come again in the midst of the battle of Armageddon, or in other words, during the course of the great war between Israel and Gog and Magog. At the second coming, all the nations of the earth are to be engaged in battle. All the nations of the earth. Not some, but all the nations of the earth. We're not sure who's going to be fighting for or against Gog, or for or against Israel. And the fighting is to be in progress in the area of Jerusalem and Armageddon, primarily. You can read this in Zechariah chapter 11, Zechariah chapter 12, and Zechariah chapter 13, and Revelations chapter 16, verses 14 through 21. The prophecies do not name the modern nations which will be fighting for or against Israel, but the designation Gog and Magog is given to the combination of nations which will seek to overthrow and destroy the remnant of the Lord's chosen seed. The 38th and 39th chapters of Ezekiel record considerable prophetic detail relative to this great war. It should be noted that it is to take place in the latter years, that it will be fought in the mountains of Israel against those who have gathered to the land of their inheritance, that the land of Israel shall be relatively unprotected, a land of unwalled villages, that Gog and Magog shall come out of the north parts in such numbers as to cover the land as a cloud, that the Lord will then come, and all men shall shake at his presence, that there will be such an earthquake as has never before been known, which will throw down the mountains, that there will be pestilence, blood, fire, and brimstone descend upon the armies, that the forces of Gog and Magog will be destroyed upon the mountains of Israel, that the supper of the great God shall then take place as the beasts and fowls eat the flesh and drink the blood of the fallen ones. Revelations chapter 19, verses 17 through 18, and Doctrine and Covenants, section 29, 18 through 21. And that the house of Israel will be 7 months burying the dead, and 7 years burning the discarded weapons of war. In the light of all this and much more that is prophetically foretold about the final great battles in the Holy Land, is it any wonder that those who are scripturally informed and spiritually enlightened watch world events with great interest as troubles continue to foment in Palestine, Egypt, and the Near East? He said Palestine because this was written in 1966. The second and final great war involving Gog and Magog is referred to by John in Revelation chapter 20, verse 7 through 9, and by the Lord in Doctrine and Covenants, section 88, 111, 116. One final word. When considering items of this sort, it is exceedingly important to stay close to the revealed word and not stray off into those speculative realms that engender strife and do not increase faith in our hearts. Close quote. Brothers and sisters, I hope you enjoyed my notes, my scattered notes, my discombobulated notes, and my research on Gog and Magog and Gog the Reubenite and where the tribe of Reuben might be.
The views and opinions shared by the Last Dispensation and/or any guests should not be construed as authoritative views from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you would like to learn more about the LDS Church, please go online to comeuntoChrist.org. The Book of Mormon is also available wherever you get your apps.